Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining our preseason app refresher masterclass. This is the Western Big Game focused class. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes to let folks get logged in and get settled and everything. So while we're waiting, just a little bit of housekeeping. Your audio and video are turned off, so we can't see or hear you. No worries if you've got noise in the background. If you do have questions you'd like us to answer, please put them in the Q&A box that should be towards the bottom of your screen on most devices. That's the best spot for those. The chat is also there. That's a great spot just to let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Questions do get lost in the chat though, so put those in the Q&A. And unlike a lot of our classes where we have somebody in the background answering Q&A as the class goes on, I'm a one-man show tonight, so I won't really be able to answer questions and present at the same time. So if your question doesn't get answered right away, I'm not ignoring you. We're just going to do the Q&A at the end of the class. And finally, this class is being recorded. Link will be sent out tomorrow evening. You'll get an email. It'll be through Zoom will be what the email looks like, and we'll have a YouTube link in there so that you can go back and watch the class, or if you have to drop out early or something like that. And then one other point, we are doing a giveaway towards the end of class. We're giving away some onX Hunt Blaze Orange ball caps. So you do have to be present to enter that giveaway. We'll post the link in the chat after kind of the main presentation portion of the class tonight. And so with that, let's get into what we're going to talk about today. The idea behind this class is that it's, like the name says, it's a refresher. Hopefully you've got some experience with the onX Hunt app. You've used it in previous years, but maybe you haven't used it since last hunting season. We're now getting close. A lot of hunting seasons have already kicked off. I know Labor Day weekend is going to be a big opener for a lot of folks, particularly in Western states. Some whitetail stuff opening up, and then September 15th, October 1st. By then, just about everybody's rolling. So we're going to go over some of the layers that we think are especially important for hunting big game in the West. And so, primarily elk, deer, antelope, bears, that kind of thing. We'll go over offline maps. Again, that's something that's critical for whether you have service or not. We think everybody should be saving offline maps. If you haven't taken a look at them since last year, there might be some updates you need to do to some of your maps. We'll go over some of the different ways that we use waypoints, especially how to share them and customize them. We'll talk about our new compass mode, which was released last year. We've made some improvements and additions to it this year. And then we'll get into that Q&A towards the second half of the class. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up the map on my tablet here. So if you're watching on a computer, it's a good idea if you can, if you have another device handy, to pull up onX on a tablet if you have it, or your phone, and just follow along. That's a great way, to learn. So give me one moment here before that will work. Zoom is giving me troubles today. We'll try one more try. Share screen, here we go. There we are. So there is a little bit of a lag here. I'll do my best to try to keep everything in pace with what I'm talking about. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our map layers. It's in the lower left-hand corner. If you're a well-versed onX user, some of this might be old hat for you. If you haven't used onX before, I forgot to mention earlier, next week we are doing an onX Hunt 101. We do those every month. So next week, Tuesday, the 27th of August, if you're looking for, hey, I just need, starting from square one, that's a class to check out. We'll show you where you can sign up for future master classes here later on. But enough of a diversion there. We're not going to talk about state layers today. So you should be aware of if you're a current onX user, your private and your public lands, all that stuff. I want to talk into some of the more, nuanced layers, some of the ones that people might overlook. So the first one we're going to do is I'm going to go into my current conditions folder, and you see I have the active wildfire layer turned on. That one is, I think, super important depending on where you're hunting. If you've got fires in your unit, I just saw, I think it might have been in Oregon, where they had emailed folks talking about, hey, most of this unit is closed because it's on fire. I think they were offering people, where they could turn their tag back in because they might not hardly be able to hunt their unit. So something to keep in mind. Here's a look at what this active wildfire layer looks like, and we have updated it recently. So this is a fire, it's in Idaho, it's in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, and you can see the extent of the fire with the perimeter there. But what we've added this year, what's brand new, are these hot spots. So those are areas where there's been kind of new fire activity or where the fire's moving. So you can see this fire has a couple of spots kind of in the north central part here, as well as in the southwest, where it might be wind that's blowing embers, or there's just more fuel there and the fire is moving that direction. So you maybe take a look at, if this is your hunting unit, this is currently on fire and the fire is spreading in these directions, so that you can maybe plan out for later on this year, is this fire going to still be going? If it is put out, do I want to hunt there at all? We all know burns can be a great place to look for deer and elk, but if it's just scorched, maybe there's not any feed left for them and no cover, maybe they're not going to be in that area. So active wildfire is something to keep in mind when you're out in the field too. Maybe there are fires going on, and this layer does update multiple times a day. You do need cell service to be able to receive those updates, of course. But if you're out there and you're worried about a fire, if you have a spot where you can grab some cell service, take a look at this layer. And if that fire is moving towards you, maybe you need to get out of Dodge before you get trapped or worse. So active wildfire, something I always have turned on throughout the year, whether it's fire season or not. And again, that's in your current conditions folder. Closing out of that, I'm going to go down to my trees, crops, and cover, and I'm going to turn on the historic wildfire layer. Now this is, once a fire is put out, it eventually gets added to our historic wildfire layer. And I believe our data right now goes back to, I should have looked this up, but I think it's 2010 are the oldest fires that we have. It'd be real embarrassing if there was one that said like 2006 on there right now. But you can take a look at these, and they are color coded. So the brighter the color, starting with kind of red or orange, let me back up. I did a horrible job of explaining that. The newer fires, the more recent fires, are a brighter color. As they get older, they fade. So you can see this low peak fire here, south of Missoula, was 2017. The 2013 fire to the north is a little bit more faded because it's an older fire. This one from 22 is brighter. They are all labeled. If you tap on the fire, tap on the burned area, it'll tell you the name of the burn and when it was put out, in this case, September 17th, 2017. But you can also, if you're kind of looking more higher level, you can get a sense just by looking at the colors there. So burns are phenomenal. If you've spent a lot of time in the mountains in the West, you know that is a magnet for deer and elk. After the burn goes through, the canopy's opened up, they get fresh green growth going in there. It can be phenomenal feeding areas there. So this is a layer I don't often have turned on when I'm out in the field, but I use it now when I'm scouting, when I'm looking at a new area, trying to determine where I want to go. That's one piece of the puzzle that I use. And again, that can be found in your trees, crops, and soil layer. Another one of those layers that I like to use is the timber cuts layer. Same kind of thing as a fire. It opens up the canopy, There can be a lot of fresh green growth in there. That can be a great spot to glass for animals. I know like guys glassing for Roosevelts on the West Coast. A lot of times they're hunting those cut areas, those cut blocks or those logging units. Great spot to look for animals. Of course, you might also have better access into a logged area. I was just scouting an area where I elk hunt in western Montana. The last couple weekends went down. There was some logging from last year, and there was pretty good roads in there. Now, they weren't drivable. They were gated, which for me as an elk hunter, I like that because it's going to keep some people out of there. But it was easy walking, right? They were driving logging trucks and all this equipment up and down there last year. Roads were still in pretty good shape. So while I was walking, it's a lot easier than walking through all the deadfall and through all the, the underbrush and everything. Let me see if I can find a logged area here for you. So this is what they look like. It's only on national forest ground. So on Forest Service is where you're going to find this layer. It's not going to be on private or state or BLM or anything else. This data it comes to us from the Forest Service. But you'll see these kind of hash marks or diagonal lines with an outline and a year. Again, the onX kind of legend is you access that by tapping. We don't have a traditional map legend here. But if I tap on that area, first it's going to tell me it's Lolo National Forest. If I scroll down, it tells me the name of the cut, Rennick Stark, and the harvest type. This was an improvement cut. It might say fuel reduction. It might say clear cut, all those different types of logging that go on. It can give you a sense of that. So some cool information there. Even gives you, this is on a west-facing slope, the slope degree, the acreage, all that information. So that's another one I always have turned on is the timber cuts. It doesn't really obscure your map like the historic wildfire does. So I will leave that one turned on typically. Scrolling back up to our land and access folder, one that I wanted to show you here that's relatively new. We did have it last year, but not a lot of people know about it, is our slope angle layer. So this one is great, especially if you're maybe not so great at reading topo maps or just have a hard time visualizing that. Sometimes it can be difficult when you're looking at all those lines to know, all right, what does this mean? How steep is this? Where are those benches and saddles? So the slope angle is kind of like a heat map. You've got your legend up on top there. Greener areas are flatter, up to yellow, orange, red, purple, and blue being the steepest. So you can more easily find, where are those flat, benchy areas? Where are those areas that we know elk don't like to bed on slopes? I think it's less than or more than 20 degrees. I believe that was one of the studies that came out of the Starkey Forest in Oregon where they do all kinds of amazing research. Look up the Starkey Forest there. But they found that elk prefer to bed on flatter areas, just like people, right? You don't want to lay down on a hill and roll off. Elk are the same. You can also use this to plan a route in or out of an area. I don't want to hike right there. That's pretty steep, right? I can find a flatter route in and out of an area. So again, that slope angle, I don't often use this in the field when I'm hunting, but I'll use it to scout. I'll use it to try to locate benches on north-facing slopes, for example. Prime elk bedding area, potentially. I'll also use it to plan a route in and out of an area, and I might use my line distance tool to draw my potential route where I want to walk. Then when I'm out in the field, I can just use that line to try to find my way. I'm going to turn off my slope angle. And one more time, that's in your land and access folder is where you find that. And these are all, I should have mentioned it earlier, these are all nationwide layers, but you don't need our nationwide or elite membership to access them. With any level of a paid membership, premium or elite, you'll have access to all the layers that I'm demonstrating today. So I'm going to close out of the land and access folder, back to our main map layers menu. Now I'm going to go to the roads, trails, and rec folder. And if you've never opened this up, the two layers that are probably turned on by default are your trails and your recreation sites. I do recommend having these turned on. I also turn on the trail slope and trail mileage. So I'm just going to move the map. I'm going to go back to Missoula because there's a good example here on Mount Sentinel to show you. So with the trail slope layer, if I just toggle it off and on, if you look at those colored lines on my map, that's showing you the slope. If I turn it off, they just go to black and white. Kind of like the slope angle gives you a sense of how steep a trail is. I can look at that red trail that goes kind of up the spine, the northern ridge on Sentinel there. Pretty steep, it's all red. If I scroll out, I can find some that are more yellow, more green, different sections, right? So that's one I recommend having turned on, especially if you're in an area where there's some designated trails that you're going to be hiking in. Makes them easier to find as well. Recreation sites are great because they'll show you campgrounds and campsites, Forest Service cabins, water access sites, all sorts of information like that. So rec sites are something I recommend turning on. One that kind of goes under the radar is the motorized roads and trails layer. So if I turn that on, I'm gonna zoom back over here. That is these purple lines. So if I turn it off, my map looks like this. Turn it back on, it looks like that. That's going to be motorized roads and trails predominantly on Forest Service. Okay, so we don't have the same sort of data set for state or BLM lands, but we do get this data from the Forest Service. That's why it's predominantly on Forest Service. So this layer can give you a lot of information. If I tap on the road and scroll down a bit, it tells me the name of the road, Howard Creek, the ID number, how long that section of it is. But then here's what I think is the important part, the width restrictions and the open and closed dates. So some of these will be just for dirt bikes. Some will be just for 50 inches or less. So your ATVs, your smaller side-by-sides, and your dirt bikes. Some of them will be wide enough for your larger side-by-sides. Some of them are fine for passenger vehicles. This one says overland. That means your pickup truck, right? Or, you know, a capable vehicle that's highway legal will work on these. You know, this road in particular, you know, I've seen Honda Civics on it, right? Not a guarantee, but those overland ones are going to be the best roads. This one that I'm going to tap on with the hash marks, that one's probably going to be a little bit rougher. It says accessible by high clearance 4x4 side-by-side. So it still would be like a passenger vehicle, but your Honda Civic's probably not going to make it. You're probably going to need a pickup truck, a Jeep, 4Runner, etc. And again, check those open and close dates. This one here opens May 16th and closes October 14th. So in Montana, that's going to be most of our archery season. It's open, but then it closes down. We have a whole suite of roads that will close down September 1st, right before our archery season opens late this year. It's the latest it can be, but they'll typically close down right before archery season. They'll close down a section. Then right before rifle season, they'll close down another section. After the rifle season ends, then they close down some more roads. And that's basically due to kind of giving the animals a place to go. That's part of the reason we have such long seasons here in Montana, is because they do close down some of those roads. Every state's different, every region is different. So do tap on those roads before you go. I have been caught before, mostly in the spring when bear hunting, where I'm gonna drive out and hunt an area and the gate's closed because I didn't check to see if it was open or not. So save yourself some of the gas and some of the frustration by verifying that the road is open and accessible to you before you go. Going back into my roads, trails, and rec, The next layer I want to talk about is the roadless areas. Now this is another one of those layers that I use primarily for scouting and almost never turn on in the field. The roadless area layer is going to put these colored or shaded areas on your map. And to be considered roadless, our kind of standard there is a half mile from a known road or trail. So, or from a known road or motorized trails. If it's a foot trail, fine, right? So you'll see where it starts, that kind of purple edge, that's that half mile boundary. And then of course, everything within it will be more than a half mile away. We know elk especially are very sensitive to vehicles and to roads. And in some cases, getting farther off the road is the way to get into more animals. We know there's going to be a lot of people that never get more than, some people never leave the road, right? They're in their vehicle all day driving around. Some people aren't going to hike very far. If you're the type of person who wants to wear out the boot leather, you can pull up the roadless areas layer. And I mean, you know, look at the Bob Marshall Wilderness here. It's all roadless, of course. So that's a way you can maybe try to separate yourself from the crowd, get into an unmolested hunting area, and maybe have yourself a good hunt by utilizing those roadless areas there. So again, I'll show what that looks like if I toggle it off and on. And again, one thing I use more for scouting than anything else when I'm out in the field, I typically don't worry about it as much. That's all I'm going to cover for layers right now. If you do have questions or you do want to learn more about certain layers, drop them in the Q&A. We'll get to that Q&A towards the end of the class. I'm going to skip over my content. I'm going to go to offline maps. Now this is something a lot of folks know about, but not everybody, so it's worth repeating. onX does work when you don't have service. You're able to see your location, mark waypoints, track yourself, but you do need to save a map beforehand. Let's say I've never saved a map before. I want to go into this area, starting from scratch, lower left-hand corner. I'm going to tap offline maps. I'm going to tap new map. And now I have this red box. Whatever's within that box is what is going to be saved. I can still move it around and adjust it, do all these things. Let's say I want to kind of hunt the Scapegoat Wilderness. I can only make it so big. Every device is going to be a little bit different. This one is 31 miles by 43 miles. If I want, I can zoom in and make it smaller. I tend to want to get the biggest map that I can. You can also choose your detail level so that it's low, medium, or high. I use the medium detail most of the time. What that's talking about is your imagery resolution, how detailed it is. You can go to a high resolution, it's going to be a much smaller map. Now, if you're hunting a relatively small unit and your tag is only good for one unit, you could save a bunch of these maps or save a handful and make a grid pattern and make like a 4x4 box or 2x2 or whatever size you need. That's an option. Personally, I use the medium ones 95% of the time. I've never had a medium map with that. It's slightly less detailed imagery resolution than the high detail. I've never been out in the field and thought, man, I'd have killed that bull if I'd have had more detailed imagery. Maybe that's my style of hunting, but it hasn't been a handicap to me. So that's my recommendation. I recommend naming your maps as well so that you know where you have a map saved. It's a way to just stay organized. I'm just going to name this one Preseason Test and hit the save button. And that's going to start downloading. If you already have maps saved from last year, but you haven't been using the app since last season, a lot of them might look like some of these below that say update available, if you see that in the bottom half of my screen there. What that means is something in that area has changed since the map was last saved. So if I tap on this one that says Big Snowies, Something has changed there. Most likely it's property ownership. It could be, you see some of these block management, these walk-in areas, those tend to change year to year. So an update is a good idea at least once at the beginning of the season. To do an update, there's a couple ways you can do it. I can tap that green circle with the check mark, and that'll start downloading. Once my earlier map finishes, that Big Snowies one will update. You can also tap on the ellipses on the right-hand side and hit update there. And finally, you can tap the ellipses at the top of the menu on the right-hand side and update all maps. I'm not going to do that right now just because we don't need to in this class, but that's what I do on my personal account. I'll be sitting, at the onX office Friday afternoon. I'm going to go out hunting on Saturday. I'll update all my maps. You don't have to do it every time there's an update available. We sometimes hear from people and they say, man, I was driving out and it said update available, so I had to pull over and find some Wi-Fi so that I could update them. If that's you, go hunting, right? You don't feel like you have to update all the time. Most of the time, it's going to be a trivial update. Somebody bought and sold a house and the name changed. Especially if you're hunting primarily public, or it's a ranch that and have permission on, it hasn't sold, you're probably going to be fine. It's a good idea to do it when you can, when you think of it. It certainly doesn't hurt to update as often as you can, but don't let that be like a hindrance to you. Don't let it derail a hunt or anything like that. Do it when you think of it. Do it when you have some Wi-Fi, you're sitting at home watching TV. Cue that up and come back to it in a few minutes when it's done. So that's enough for offline maps. That should be old hat for some of you, I hope. I'm going to move the map back to my location. I want to talk about waypoints. A couple of things we get questions on quite a bit. So I've got a number of waypoints marked on my map here. I'm not going to go over how to mark waypoints. Again, if you want to learn more about that, check out our onX Hunt 101 next Tuesday. But let's say I want to meet somebody at this white parking waypoint that I marked. Let's say this is where we're going to start hunting, and I want to meet up with my buddy. All I need to do is tap on that waypoint and tap the share button. And now I have two options, and one of these is new. Share with a link, that's the old share. That's the way we've always had. That's still the way most people are going to share a waypoint. I'm going to tap next. I'm on a tablet here, so it doesn't give me the option to text. On your phone, you'll see an option to text that to somebody or email it. Most people are going to text. It generates a link. You send it to your buddy. They'll receive that. They tap on it. It opens up their onX and says, Jack has shared a waypoint with you. Would you like to view it? You hit accept, and that will put the waypoint on their map in the same spot with all the same information. Now, they're not able to change it or edit it or delete it. Well, they could delete it, but they can't change it or edit it or anything or share it with anyone else. The sharer owns it. It's kind of like sharing a Google Doc and making it read-only. That's a way to think about it. But I want to back up and talk about this share nearby. That's new this year. And this is kind of in response to people that were hunting without cell service and still wanted to be able to share waypoints or tracks with their friends. Share nearby is, you do have to be close because it's going to share through AirDrop on iOS devices, and on Android devices, I gotta be honest, I don't know the exact name. It's like Google sharing, something along those lines. So you do have to be on the same system. It's only iPhone to iPhone or Android to Android. You can't do iPhone to Android just because those companies haven't built out a sharing system between the two. I wouldn't hold my breath for it, to be perfectly honest. But if you're all on the same, if you're all on Android or you're all on iPhone, this will work for you. You can hit share nearby, and as long as you're within 10, 20 feet of each other, when you hit that share, it'll pop up on their screen and they can add it. So this is a way to share markups when you don't have service, when you can't text or email or something. The drawback is you do have to be relatively close, but if you're doing a backcountry bivvy hunt or setting a base camp and you all come back at night and want to share what you saw and heard that day, you can do that. If you're blood trailing, everybody can track where they go if you kind of split up. And if you need to regroup and refigure out what you're going to do, everybody could share their tracks with each other so you can see where everybody's walked or something like that. It's pretty slick. We tested it out spring bear hunting this year. Works really great. Nice to have when you don't have service to still be able to share there. The other thing I wanted to mention with waypoints, it's not something new, but it's something most people don't do, and that is customizing your waypoints. I don't know what it is, but the vast majority of the customers that we talk to through customer support and in person, 9 out of 10 times they've never customized a waypoint. You can see my waypoints. I've got different colors. I've got different icons on them. It is a little bit of work, but I mean, hunting's a lot of work, right? So the more you put into your waypoints, the more you get out of them. And really our goal for you is to be more efficient when you're out in the field. You can imagine if you had 500 waypoints and they were all the generic red X that looks like this, with no more information, and I just hit save. Let's say a year from now, I'm pulling up my map and it's like, well, why did I mark that? What did I see? Was that where I parked the truck? Did I flush a grouse? Did I shoot a bull? I don't know what it is, right? So I can tap on it and hit edit. First thing I'm gonna do is rename it. Maybe this is a good glassing area. Just gonna name it glassing. I'm gonna change the icon type, and we've got like 90 some different ones. You can scroll through them, they're alphabetical. You can also tap this search bar at the top here, and you can search by icon name. So I'm gonna search for glassing area. And then I'm going to change the color. Now, how you color code your waypoints is entirely up to you. We have a number of different ways people at the office do it. We did a preseason app refresher for the whitetail folks on Tuesday. My colleague, Jared Larson, he does his by year. So he picks 2024, all my waypoints are this color. 2023, they were a different color. 2022, they were a different color. He likes that because then he can kind of see change over the years and see, oh, last year they were in this area and this year, they're nowhere near there. Why might that be? Or weather conditions different, things like that. Going by years, one way to do it. Personally, myself, I'm a generalist hunter. I'm gonna hunt everything this fall from grouse to elk, mule deer, whitetail, waterfowl, pronghorn. Maybe I'll find a bear. So I do my coloration by species. So my deer is going to be orange, my upland game is all yellow, my elk are brown. For me, I like that because I can know at a glance when I'm looking at my map just by looking at the colors. Okay, that's where I got into some grouse when I was hunting with my dog. That's where I was finding elk. This is where I've seen deer, etc. Some people prefer to do it something totally different. It's up to you. My advice is pick a system that makes sense and stick with it. It might seem tedious at first to every time you mark a waypoint, go in and edit it, but you will thank yourself later when you come back the next year and it's not a bunch of X's that you have no idea what they mean. Finally here, I don't always do this, but sometimes I will put notes in there. I've been scouting some elk spots out this year, and I'll just put notes in there. Hey, scouted this on August 17th. This wallow was dry, whatever. Hey, scouted this, bumped 2 cows. Whatever makes sense to you. I also do this for if I'm lucky enough to kill an elk. I'll put some notes in there just on the hunt. Hey, came in at 315, shot at 23 yards, recovered after a 100-yard blood trail, whatever, just for kind of a journal. I just kind of like to be able to have that to look back at. And then I'll also attach some photos there as well. I'll take photos of, the grip and grin if I have a successful hunt, take pictures of wallows, rubs, different kinds of sign. If I have a spot where I'm sitting water, I might build up a little bit of a blind and take a picture of that. Again, it's what you make of it. And the more you put in, the more you get out of that with your waypoints. I'm just gonna save this. There we go. And close out of that waypoint. All right, so speaking of waypoints, I mentioned our new compass mode earlier, and we did do a dedicated class on compass mode. If you really want to dive deep into it, if you go to the onX Hunt YouTube channel and go to playlists, and go to the Masterclass playlist, we have a whole class. It's called onX Deep Dive Compass Mode. Take a look at that. I'm going to give you kind of the cliff notes today. So I'm going to zoom in. Of course, we're in town here. We're in Missoula, but just pretend we're in the woods. To get into compass mode, I'm going to tap my location button. That centers the map on my location. Tap it again. And then tap the compass button or the compass icon that appears above. That's going to bring you into this mode. Another way to get into it, if you prefer, this might be easier for some, is to tap on Tools. That's in the bottom center of my map. I tap Tools. Compass mode is in the bottom row, second from the left. Tap there, brings me to the same place. Now I have a compass heading at the top of my map, and I have sort of a gridded line or a dashed line emanating from my location dot at the bottom of the screen. If I tap on the icon that looks like a rangefinder in the lower right-hand corner, looks like a rangefinder, I just tapped on it, it turns red. Now the bottom half of my line has turned red, and I can adjust this. So you can kind of see, maybe if I move it, this will help a bit. I can see how far away this target is here. So if I have ranged a bedded bull, let's say, and I need to put a stock on it. Archery season's up first. We'll use archery hunting for an example. Let's say my effective range is 50 yards, and I'm not going to shoot farther than that. So let's say the bull is bedded right there. I ranged it. It's at 740 yards. I point my phone at the bull. I enter compass mode. I enter rangefinder mode. I extend this out to 740 yards. So I'm just dragging my finger up and down on the map here. 740 yards. There we go. Now if I tap that orange square, that waypoint icon, drops a waypoint right on that spot. I can hit done. There we go. And it's placed there. Now I have a landmark to shoot for as I'm planning a stock. And again, if you have the time, go ahead and edit this, make it a bull elk icon and whatever. In the heat of the moment, maybe don't worry about it. If you need to hustle over there, by all means, do that. What I'm also going to do with this waypoint is I'm going to utilize our range radius tool. So let me back up. I'm going to tap on the waypoint. That pulls up this info card about it. If I scroll up, if I just pull it up, I have wind direction and the waypoint radius. If I tap on waypoint radius, that allows me to impose this circle around that waypoint at any distance that I want. So let's say my shooting distance is 50 yards. Now I have, so it's a 100-yard diameter, 50-yard radius, but I know if I'm within this, assuming the bull doesn't move, if I'm within this circle, I'm within my shooting range. I'm still going to use my laser rangefinder when it comes time to take the shot, but I at least have a reference on my map. So as my blue dot, as I get closer, I know when I'm getting close, so I don't have to always be ranging right? I know when I'm getting close. I know if I'm within that circle, I'm within shooting range. Then it's time to start, preparing for the shot. For rifle hunting, I think this is even more useful because you're typically able to shoot a lot farther. Let's say your effective range is 400 yards. Now when I'm out in the field, I've got a bedded mule deer buck, let's say, and I've spotted it from 800 yards. Okay, I got to get to within 400. So I can follow my blue dot as I'm moving, but I can also use this circle when planning the stock to look for potential shooting positions. Maybe it's bedded in kind of a tough area and I might not be able to go straight at it, and I've got to find a spot amongst all the timber and topography of where can I potentially get a good shooting position. Maybe I want to lay down prone, or I prefer to. Where might be a spot? And of course, we're in town here. It doesn't look quite the same, but I can take a look at that and say, all right, maybe if I circle around and get up to the north, or I go to the southeast, or whatever direction, that's where I'm likely to be able to get a good shot, something like that. The other thing you can do, if I tap on the waypoint again, down at the bottom, I'm going to tap go to waypoint. That's going to draw a line as the crow flies from my location to that waypoint. And that is dynamic. That will move with you as you move. So as you move closer, the number in the top left corner there will move. Another good way to just so that you don't always have to be range finding it. Maybe you're dropping out of sight of the animal for a large portion of the stock. You still kind of have a reference of about how far away you are and how much distance you need to knock off. So another very underutilized tool. It's not something that's new, but I think more people should be using. I love it. I use it all the time. Sometimes I use go to waypoint when it's the end of the day and I just need to know how much farther is it to the truck, and just to keep myself going after a long day. So there's that. Again, if you have more questions on compass mode, that is a relatively new feature, drop them in the Q&A. I got two more things I want to talk about here before we get to the question and answer segment. Another feature that is not brand new, but a lot of people don't realize is there is our weather information. There's a couple ways you can access the weather. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a button that says weather. If I tap on that, it's going to pull up a forecast for the center of my map. As I move it around, you can kind of see better where it is pulling that weather from, and it will pull weather from the 3 closest weather stations and kind of extrapolate that to give you a forecast for your location. So it's not just pulling from the nearest airport, it's going to pull from multiple weather locations and kind of use that data to give the best forecast for your exact location you're looking at. The biggest part of this for me personally when I'm hunting is the sunrise and sunset data. I used to carry, the little booklet around that would show you sunrise, sunset times. Now I just use my onX map so that I can know exactly when shooting light is. If I scroll up, it gives me an extended forecast, gives me an hourly forecast, gives me the barometric pressure, if that's something you're interested in. Also gives me the moon phase, the current one, and moving out for a week. Tells you when the moon rises and moon sets and all that information if that's something that is of importance to you. The other way to get weather information, and honestly what I do most of the time, is by querying the map. So I'm just going to tap on the map. It brings up this card that we're used to, where it tells me city of Missoula, all that info. But if I click over to the weather tab, it's going to pull that information and it's going to tell me the same information I was just looking at, basically. 2 different ways to get to the same goal there. Okay, so there's your weather. You don't have to use a separate app. You can get it all within onX. You do have to have internet service to pull a new forecast. So if you're on day 10 of a 10-day backpacking trip, this was a question we got earlier, you do have to have some service to pull that, right? There's no way for us to connect to the weather stations without that. So if you are going on an extended backcountry trip, you want to be able to know the weather, that's when you're going to want to use a satellite communicator, like an inReach is what I use. They have where you can, I think it counts as one of your messages, depending on what plan you're on. You can pull the weather that way if you don't have service. But if you do, use the onX there. All right, last thing before Q&A, I want to talk about our recent imagery. So I'm going to move to an area that we just had a fire in. And I'm going to go to my lower right-hand corner to my base map button and tap on that. Yours is probably going to say SAT or HYB or Topo. And then I'm going to tap Recent Imagery. Now, Recent Imagery, you do have to have an elite membership to use that. That's the only feature that I've demonstrated where you do have to have the elite membership to access. But if you do, you can take a look at imagery that is taken every 2 weeks. So this imagery, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, was taken between August 4th and the 18th. And I can scroll back through time and see the change. So if you look at the middle of my screen, this was an area that burned. And you can see it turned from green to brown. So it is lower resolution than our standard imagery. That's the trade-off. It's not meant to replace our standard base map imagery, but it's taken by satellites every 2 weeks. So you're not going to be able to zoom in and see with the same detail as our regular imagery if I toggle those, but it's still useful. Like, man, look at the difference in this area just after that fire went through, right? So you can use it to check. You can check burns. If you know there's active logging going on, you can check that. Waterfowl hunters use it a lot to check water levels, check the crops, check the harvest, how that's progressing. You can use it later on in the season when we're getting snow. Check where the snow levels are at before you drive out there and find out, oh no, there's 3 feet of snow and I can't get into my hunting area. You can use that as kind of one piece of information to help your decision making. So that recent imagery, something I would take a look at. Again, it's not something that I tend to use out in the field very much, but when I'm planning, when I'm scouting, it's another piece of the puzzle that I like to add in there. All right, I'm going to stop sharing there. And I do want to get to our giveaway here. I am going to post the giveaway link in the chat. And I'm also going to turn the chat off for right now, just so that everyone can have access to use that link. Sometimes when chats keep rolling in, it's tough for folks to find that link. So it's turned off for right now, so people can utilize that link. I'm also going to post it on the screen here. So if you're not able to tap on that link or copy and paste it, you can type this link into a browser. Giving away 10 of these hats. And I will email everybody tomorrow with, if you're the winner, you'll get an email from me tomorrow, or one of the 10 winners, and we'll get your hat sent out as well. So you can expect that sometime mid-morning tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to leave that up for just a bit so that folks can access it, and then I'm going to pull up. Actually, that just turned that off. And then a couple more resources for you before we get into Q&A. If you are interested in learning more, I should have mentioned it at the top. Our customer support team is a phenomenal group of folks. They are available. I think we're doing 7-day-a-week email throughout hunting season. We've got phone hours right now, or Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. You can give us a call. You can shoot us an email. The email address is help@onxmaps.com. So if you do have any issues this hunting season, or you want to learn more about something, shoot us an email. They will respond within 24 business hours. So if you email them tonight you can expect to get a response sometime tomorrow from them. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing for now so that I can pull up some of our questions. Let me take a look. Seems like we got some good ones in here. Christopher mentioned navigating public and private land, specifically trying to find access to what appears to be public land surrounded by private. So Chris, this is actually a pretty widespread problem, particularly in the West. I guess it's a problem depending who you ask and your perspective, but that landlocked private land or public land, if it's surrounded by private and there's not an easement to it, there's not a road through it, really the only way to get there is by helicopter, by air, or by getting permission from the private landowner. There's a lot of, and you might be aware of the court case that's currently going on in Wyoming right now that hasn't really officially been settled yet, as far as I know. There's not a clear-cut ruling on if you can access like checkerboarded public land. So if there's a parcel you're looking at, Christopher, and it's surrounded on all sides by private land, the only legal way to access it that I know of is, sometimes I have seen and heard of people renting a helicopter. If you have the funds to do that, more power to you. Otherwise, you do have to get permission from the private landowner, right? They have the rights over their land and who crosses it. So that's, I wish I had a better answer for you there, but that's the answer to accessing that. Let's see, Forrest asked, I have trouble with the map flipping, he puts in quotes, the land layout. Usually I have to start walking to see direction I am actually heading. Is there a heading direction like on a boat GPS? So what I would use there for us, I'm not sure if you're aware of the compass mode I just demoed, or just kind of the heads up mode. If you tap your location button twice, that will orient the map so that whatever direction you're facing is up instead of it being north. And then it will also have that blue sight cone that comes off of your location dot. And then as you walk, you'll see the map move as you walk. So I hope that's what you're asking. I hope that helps. Robert asks, are timber cuts on Forest Service lands only, not on private? That's correct, Robert. That data comes to us from the Forest Service, so it's only on Forest Service land. Well, a couple people mentioned my iPad was making the charging sound. Sorry about that. I did unplug it after I saw some of those come through, so hopefully the last 20, 30 minutes were better. Rudy asks, can you share between Android and iOS using Share Nearby? You cannot. We are using the built-in infrastructure within those devices. So just like you can't airdrop a picture from an iPhone to an Android, same thing with the waypoints. It has to be on the same system. So Android to Android, iOS to iOS only. Rick asked, I was doing offline maps the other night and each one covered a larger area as I did them. So one was a certain size, the next covered more area, the next covered more area. How do you make them cover a smaller or larger area? Let me pull up my map again to show you how to do that. Just give me one moment. So if I go into my offline maps menu, boy, that zoom has a lag. There we go. If I tap new map, you can see right now it's pretty zoomed in. It's like a 2.5 by 2.5 square mile map, or 2.5 by 2.5. All I'm doing, you can't really see it because I'm on my iPad, is I'm pinching my fingers and spreading them apart. Just like you zoom in and out on a map, you can do the same thing with your offline map. So if I move to an area where I don't have any, you can only zoom out so far. There is a limit on how big the map can be due to download size, but I can make it smaller if I want. So some guys will use this. This is really small. Some guys will use this in our whitetail class earlier this week. Jared gave the example of, I'm hunting this farm and that's all I'm hunting and I don't have permission anywhere else. He will zoom in with the high detail map so it just covers that farm and maybe a little bit outside of it in case he has to blood trail a deer on a neighbor's or something. But he will do that to have a small map so it downloads fast and takes up less space. In the West, in Montana where I hunt, I like to have as much coverage as I can. My phone does have a lot of open space. If you're trying to save space, you can see estimated download size here, about 0.5 gig. If I zoom in, down at the bottom, estimated download size, 0.01 gigabytes. All depends on the size there. But just zooming in and out is how you change the size of that, Rick. Zach asks, when will we be able to share waypoints, tracks, and folders in a common share style where both parties can edit and add within the folder independently? That's a great question, Zach. Unfortunately, I don't have a time frame for you. I know that has been talked about, and I believe there has been some preliminary work done to start that process. That's something we plan to do in the future. I can't guarantee you it's not going to be this hunting season. I can tell you that. I don't know if and when that will be available, but that is something I will run up the flagpole and mention to the engineers that it was asked in the class to try to get some more, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, as they say. Doug asks, how do you bring up part of a map that is 200 miles from me that I want to save as offline? So let me back out of this. I'll show you the best way to do this. All right, so I'm located in Missoula, Montana. Let's say I am going to hunt eastern Montana, hundreds of miles away from me, but I need to save an offline map and I want to do it before I get there. I'm going to zoom out on my map. I'm going to move my map to eastern Montana. I'm going to zoom in. I'm just picking a random spot. I have no plans to hunt here this year. And then I just go in to my offline maps and I save that area. So that's how you do that, Doug. Spencer asked about on-demand imagery. So on-demand imagery was something we formerly offered that's no longer a part of the onX system. We did have some issues with the on-demand images, just not quite being up to snuff, not quite being the quality we expected. So that program it's not active anymore, Spencer. Rudy asked, why doesn't your view show the rain icon within weather? Not sure what you mean by rain icon, Rudy. It's not raining in Missoula right now, and I don't know if we have any forecasted, but when it is raining, it does show me a rain icon. Yeah, look at Saturday there. It's showing that it's going to rain. So if you were asking something else, Rudy, send us an email to help@onxmaps.com. Our customer support might be better able to help you in that forum. Joel asked, how do I get my screen to look like aerial drone footage? I don't really know what you're referring to, Joel, there. I know if you're talking about like maybe like the Google Maps, like flyover feature, if that's what you're referencing, that's not something that we have currently. If I'm way off base, give me some more context and let me know. Michael asks, when will onX code a landscape format? Great question. It's something that we do get some requests for. However, most of our customers are using onX on a phone held in their hand. So the vast majority of customers are using onX in portrait mode. Not that folks who want to use landscape mode, we don't care or aren't important, absolutely are. It's just a very small subset of onX app users that would utilize the landscape mode. It's something we may build in the future, but I don't want to set any unrealistic expectations and tell you, hey, it's coming soon when it's not. But again, that's something I will run up the flagpole, and the more people that request it, the more folks that are asking for it, that can kind of get things moving a little quicker. So I'll add you to that request list. Derek asks, how to get weather to update. I'm connected to Wi-Fi, yet app still has offline banner at bottom of weather. So we do sometimes see some issues with that weather depending on where you are in your device. Derek, you may have to close out of the app and reopen it. Can sometimes jostle the weather and get it to refresh and to turn on for you. If that still doesn't work, if closing the app fully and reopening it doesn't work, you may be experiencing a bug. I'm not aware of any active bugs with weather right now, but that's not to say something hasn't happened. Shoot us an email, help@onxmaps.com. Our customer support team will get that straightened out for you. Let's see. We are at an hour here. I don't know that I'll be able to get to all the questions, but we'll answer a few more here. Kevin said, I turned on recent imagery and see the value of it. When I turned it back off, the property lines and owner information are no longer on the screen. How do I turn that back on? I have never seen that, Kevin. First thing I would check is your map layers. That's how you turn that information on and off, regardless of if you've been messing with recent imagery or not. So open up your map layers menu, tap on the state you're looking at. In this case, I tap on Montana. And your private and government lands layers are at the top there. They maybe have gotten toggled off. If you just tap them, that will turn them back on. Daniel asked, what features can you use when you're plugged into Android Auto? Excellent question. So Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are some relatively new features for us. We had CarPlay last hunting season. Android Auto is ready to roll now as well. So basically, when you're using onX on your car's head unit, it's mostly mirroring your app screen. So there are a whole host of safety rules and regulations that we have to follow that are set by Apple and by Google, because they don't want people, messing with their head unit too much when they should be focused on the road. So you can view the map on your head unit, you can see your waypoints, you can see all of the layers, you can see your location, but it's mostly a view-only experience for safety. We don't want people marking waypoints and doing all kinds of stuff when they're traveling down the freeway, right? So if you do want to do that kind of thing, you have to do it on your phone. Make sure you're being safe. But on your head unit, on your in-dash screen, it's mostly a view-only experience, which is still sweet when you're driving through and you can tell what's private, what's public, who the landowners are, see where your waypoints and things like that. Jim asked, when is the onX crew going to share all their sweet spots? Man, if I had any sweet spots, we probably won't be sharing all our spots, just like I don't expect anybody to share their spots with me. But it's always worth a try, Jim. Rick asked, unless I am zoomed into an area, when I mark a waypoint, it can be off by half a mile. Am I doing something wrong? I would say yes, Rick, you do have to zoom into an area to mark a waypoint. So if I wanted to mark a waypoint on a particular creek drainage, I'm not going to be zoomed out like I am here. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm personally going to get as close as I can to mark that waypoint. The closer you are, the more accurate it's going to be. You can imagine if I was out this far, it's not going to be quite as accurate. So zoom in as close as you can, Rick. And if it is off, you can always move a waypoint. So here's a waypoint right here that I had placed. Let's say it's not quite right. I can go in and tap edit. And now I'm going to tap on the map and move it and save it. And there it is over there. So you can always move it after the fact if it's not quite right. Tanner asks, how often are the maps updated? This would not include the recent map. He's talking about recent imagery mode. I have a particular unit that looks different on my map than in real time. So when you're talking about when are maps updated, I assume you're talking about imagery and not private land ownership information. Map imagery, our goal is to have imagery that is no older than 3 years. We're not there yet. We have some states, like my home state of Minnesota, is quite a bit older than that right now. We are prioritizing the states that are the oldest right now. The hard part is there's only so many aerial imagery providers out there, and a lot of them prioritize areas where people are because that's where the money is. They prioritize cities and urban areas, not typically what hunters want. So to get super updated, good resolution imagery in rural areas and in the mountains is a little bit more difficult. We have updated some states this year. We will be updating more. It's not going to be real time. That technology does not exist for civilians, at least in a high resolution imagery. It is going to be a few years old typically. Rudy asks, can you drop a waypoint on an offline map? If so, will it automatically sync with the online maps when the mobile device is connected to the internet? You've got it, Rudy. You can still mark waypoints when you're offline. You can run the tracker and track yourself. You can do all those things. And then when you return to service, that's when it syncs up, with the server so that it's visible on your web map and all that good stuff. So you absolutely can drop one when you're offline. Let's see a few more here. Sammy asked, is there a way to see shading of the terrain as the sun moves throughout the day? Looking for the cool spots elk are resting in. At this time, there's not, but that is something I have brought up a couple times of, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could look at the map, especially in our 3D mode, and have it show me, hey, when the sun's at 8 o'clock, when it's noon, when it's 3 o'clock, what do the shadows look like? That could be huge. So I don't know if there are models out there that do that, what that data looks like, but that is something I will keep bringing up and hopefully we can add in the future, Sammy. See, Fernando asks, is there a way to highlight unit boundary lines? Yes and no, Fernando. So we do have all of the boundaries of the units listed here. I'm gonna get to an area where I don't have offline maps so it doesn't look as confusing. It's those green lines, and they're labeled. You can see 703, 704, 705. If I tap, it should, maybe not because I'm zoomed out too far. But turn on your hunt unit layer. That will, turn those units on. There's not a way to make an individual unit stand out amongst the others. Maybe that's what you're asking. That would be something, maybe we could do in the future. Michael asks, how big do you run your offline maps? Do you make them really small or 20 miles? What's the most efficient? Personally, I make them as big as I can. That's partly because I have plenty of space on my phone, but also because I just want to be able to have as much area as possible so that if I go to my A spot and it's not good, and I go to my B spot and it's not good, and I'm running out of spots, I know I've got enough coverage of offline maps. And what I'll do sometimes, you can see here, one of these maps isn't downloaded currently, but I will save multiple maps and put them together. And then I have a much, much bigger area. So I do like to have the biggest medium resolution maps that I can. All right, we'll do 2 more questions here. Randy asked, I have a Mac computer but can't seem to get TerrainX to work, and I'm an elite member. We did have a bug with TerrainX that was affecting a lot of people. I think it was last week. Our engineers pushed an update that resolved that for most folks. But Randy, if you're still seeing that issue, our email address is help@onxmaps.com, and our phone number is 406-540-1600. You can give us a call. You can also shoot us an email. Our customer support team will take a look, see what's going on there, and hopefully get you straightened out. All right. Last question, Jim. Will you ever be able to create a group and track each other within the group? Yes, you will at some point. Not right now. We don't have internally. We always refer to this feature as like a buddy tracker or a group tracker. So where you would be able to see where your hunting buddies are located on the map. That is something we hope to offer in the future. There are some other apps that do that right now. Like if you've used like Find Friends or Find My iPhone, things like that. It will only work when there's service. Okay, your phone doesn't. At least most phones right now, they don't have like a Garmin Rhino. A lot of people still use those because you can see where each other are on them. The first iteration, it'll just be when you have cell service. I know some of the newer iPhones, they'll be able to communicate with satellites, kind of like that inReach capability. I would expect as that technology broadens and gets adopted more, at some point in the future, you're likely going to be able to see people even when you don't have service. That's not coming anytime soon, but what will be coming at some point in the not super distant future is to be able to track your buddies when you're within service. Okay, I'm not going to make a promise that it's going to be next year or anything like that, but that is something we're working on. All right, I know I said one more question, but last one here. Kevin asked, will I be able to go back and see the recording of this webinar? Yes, Kevin, we will have it uploaded to the Masterclass playlist on the onX Hunt YouTube channel tomorrow morning. And then we will send everybody in the class an email that will have that YouTube link in it. So you'll be able to go back and watch it and share it with friends. And so with that, we went a little over time, but that's all right. There were some good questions in there. Just want to thank everybody again. Reminder, check out our future master classes. You will have a survey at the end of this class, just kind of ask you to rate the class, but also we're soliciting ideas for future classes. If you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, whether it's onX Hunt app specific or more of a general hunting topic, how to, scout for Hungarian partridge, or how to, locate mule deer in badland country or something, whatever it is, let us know what you want to hear so that we can keep putting on classes for you. And once again, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a good season this year. It's getting close. And make sure you're practicing with your bow or rifle or shotgun or your weapon of choice. I'm going to go do some of that right now. Have a good night.